My roommate showed up in my ER and exposed my biggest secret. Now they're all waiting for me at home. I 28 live in a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 roommates. It's small and we step on each other's toes sometimes, but it works for us because we were all in graduate programs when we met and needed something cheap. I still remember the day we all met through a housing board posting at the university. Alex, 27, whom we call A, was finishing his master's in computer science, Sarah, 29, was working on her PhD in environmental science, and Maya, 28, was pursuing her MBA. We were all broke students just trying to make it work in an expensive city. For the last 6 years, we've all split rent evenly, and I've been fine with that. Even when they all got jobs and I was still a resident, I didn't once ask to adjust the rent. Sarah landed a position at an environmental consulting firm, Maya started working for a startup, and Alex got a job as a software developer at a local tech company. Meanwhile, I was grinding through my medical residency, practically living at the hospital. To be honest, I'm a very quiet and non-confrontational person, and residency kept me on weird hours, so I didn't speak to them a lot and they didn't even realize that I finished my program when I did. The nature of emergency medicine residency meant I was working overnight shifts, coming home when they were leaving for work, and sleeping when they were awake. Our paths barely crossed except for the occasional weekend when our schedules aligned. I live on the 2nd floor of our apartment in a space off the attic storage that was meant to be an office, so I keep to myself and go about my business. It's a quirky space, you have to go through a narrow staircase past the regular bedrooms to get there, but I've made it cozy over the years. The slanted ceilings and small window give it a sort of nest-like feel, which suited me fine given how little time I spent there during residency anyway. The transition from resident to attending physician was seamless for me. Once I became a licensed emergency physician, I was able to find a job in our city relatively quickly and started working about 4 months out of residency. The familiar faces at Central City Hospital made it an easy choice. I'd already worked as an EMT there for years around this hospital, even in college when I was getting clinical hours for med school, so I knew the ed well and it wasn't hard for me to get a job there. I still had loans from med school to pay off, so I saw no problem with hanging around and paying my same share of the rent, utilities, and groceries that I paid for 6 years until I built up savings, even though I was making more than my other 3 roommates combined. The mountain of medical school debt wasn't going to pay itself off, and I had a solid plan to tackle it aggressively over the next few years. Plus, our rent-controlled apartment was a steal in this market. We'd locked in our lease during the pandemic, and our landlord, Mrs. Chen, seemed content to keep reliable tenants rather than chase higher rents. I'm not in a relationship, don't want kids now, and I liked my little living arrangements while I got some savings behind me. My life had fallen into a comfortable routine, work my shifts at the ed, come home to my attic sanctuary, occasionally join the others for movie nights when our schedules aligned. Sarah would sometimes leave me plates of her experimental vegan dishes in the fridge, Maya would share her Netflix password, and Alex would help troubleshoot my laptop when it acted up. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. The signs of tension had been there, I suppose, if I'd been paying more attention. Alex had started taking longer to pay his share of the utilities, often waiting until the last possible day. I'd noticed him taking more Uber Eats delivery jobs in the evenings after his regular work hours. Sarah had mentioned in passing that he'd been asking to borrow money for groceries, but I'd been so focused on my own transition to attending physician that I hadn't really processed what that meant. I was fine until crap hit the fan yesterday, and by some insane stroke of bad luck, Alex was in a car crash and was transported to the hospital by ambulance when I was on shift. It was about halfway through my 12-hour shift when the paramedics brought him in. I was reviewing another patient's chart when I heard the familiar radio crackle, single vehicle collision, male in his late 20s, conscious and alert. I didn't think anything of it until I heard them call out his name. He was fine, just a bit of whiplash and a stitched-up cut from broken glass, but while he was in the ED he saw me and realized I wasn't a resident anymore. I couldn't avoid treating him, we were short-staffed that night, and I was the attending on duty. The moment he saw me in my attending physician badge instead of the familiar resident badge, his eyes narrowed. Even though he couldn't pin down my exact salary, a quick Google search could tell him that in our city I was making at least double what my roommates were. I tried to keep things professional, treating him like any other patient while secretly hoping he wouldn't bring up our living situation. But I could see the wheels turning in his head as I examined him, especially when the nurse called me Dr. Anderson instead of the usual Kate he was used to hearing at home. The cut on his forehead needed 6 stitches, and I could feel the tension building with each suture I placed. He was pissed and he told my other 2 roommates while I was still at work, so when I came home after my shift ended at 11 p.m., they were all waiting for me. The scene I walked into felt surreal, all 3 of them sitting in our small living room, the TV off, which never happened, and the air thick with tension. Maya was perched on the edge of the couch, her usual relaxed demeanor replaced with rigid posture. Sarah sat cross-legged in our threadbare armchair, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. Alex, sporting the fresh bandage on his forehead, stood leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. He confronted me and asked me what I was making, and I told them the truth. I didn't see the point in lying. They could easily look up the average salary for an emergency physician in our city. The moment I stated the number, the room erupted. They all lost their minds at me because I knew that Alex had been struggling to make his share of the rent every month, whereas I was hoarding my money. You've been watching me take extra delivery jobs while sitting on a 6-figure salary? Alex's voice cracked with anger and what sounded like betrayal. I've been eating ramen 3 times a week. Sarah jumped in, her environmental scientist precision coming through even in her anger. We've been splitting everything 4 ways for 6 years. 6 years. And for the last 4 months, you've been making more than all of us combined. Maya, usually the peacemaker of the group, just sat there shaking her head. I can't believe you didn't say anything. We're supposed to be friends, Kate. I listened to what they had to say but said that I still had loans to pay off and I was going to bed. I was tired after a long shift, and I'm aware that I was probably really blunt and cold because when I'm getting yelled at, part of my job description is just to take it with a calm face. Years of dealing with angry patients and their families had trained me to maintain a neutral expression, which probably made things worse. I could tell my clinical detachment was only fueling their anger. As I climbed the stairs to my attic room, I heard Maya mutter something about typical doctor attitude. The comment stung more than I wanted to admit. I'd worked with these people through their celebrations, Sarah's successful dissertation defense, Maya's big promotion, Alex's first software launch. I'd been there through their breakups and family emergencies, even if I was often just a quiet presence in the background. But now, it felt like all of that history was being rewritten through the lens of my salary. This morning, they've all been giving me the cold shoulder, and though they haven't talked about it yet, I can feel it coming. The kitchen, usually a neutral zone where we could at least manage polite small talk, has become a minefield of awkward silences. Sarah, who usually leaves her fancy coffee maker out for everyone to use, pointedly packed it up and took it to her room. Alex, who normally works from home on Thursdays, made a show of packing up his laptop and leaving for the office. Maya just grabbed her yogurt and retreated to her room without even a glance in my direction. The tension is palpable, and I know this isn't sustainable. The comfortable routine we'd maintained for 6 years has been shattered, and I'm not sure how to fix it. I don't know how to address this because I really liked our living arrangements and don't want it to change, but I can't help feeling like this might be the end of our unconventional living situation. The irony isn't lost on me that after years of handling medical emergencies, it's this personal crisis that has me feeling completely out of my depth. In the ED, I always know the next step: assess, diagnose, treat. But here, in this apartment that's been my home for 6 years, I'm frozen, unsure of how to proceed. The same qualities that make me good at my job, staying calm under pressure, maintaining professional distance, focusing on practical solutions, seem to be working against me now. As I sit in my attic room during what should be my sleep time before my next night shift, I can hear them moving around downstairs. The familiar creaks of the floorboards, the sound of the coffee maker, the gentle hum of the refrigerator, all these ordinary noises now seem loaded with tension. Maya's music, which usually drifts up from her room while she works out, is conspicuously silent. Sarah's weekend meal prep, which typically fills the apartment with amazing smells by now, hasn't started. Even Mrs. Chen's cat, who usually sunbathes on our shared balcony, seems to have picked up on the tension and is nowhere to be seen. I've got another shift starting in 8 hours, and I know I should be sleeping, but my mind keeps circling back to the look on Alex's face in the ED yesterday. The way his expression changed when he realized I wasn't just Dr. Anderson, emergency physician, but Kate, his roommate who'd been watching him struggle financially while sitting on a substantially higher salary. The way Sarah's voice cracked when she talked about splitting everything fairly for 6 years. The disappointment in Maya's eyes when she called me out on my silence. Part of me wants to defend myself, to pull out my student loan statements, to show them the aggressive payment plan I've set up, to explain that I'm not really sitting on piles of money like they seem to think. I want to tell them about the nights I spent studying while they were out having fun, the birthdays and holidays I missed during residency, the physical and emotional toll of working in emergency medicine. But I know that would only sound defensive and probably make things worse. My phone buzzes with a text from the ed-charge nurse asking if I can pick up an extra shift this weekend. They're short-staffed again. Any other time, I would have jumped at the chance for extra hours to put toward my loans. Now, the thought of spending more time away from this situation feels both tempting and cowardly. I leave the message unanswered as I hear someone, probably Maya, based on the footsteps, walk past my door without the usual friendly knock she'd give when she wanted to check if I was awake. The worst part is that I can see both sides of this situation. Yes, I could have told them about my promotion and salary increase. Yes, I could have offered to pay a larger share of the rent once I started making more money. But I also know that I'm not obligated to subsidize my roommates' living expenses just because I make more money now. The rent split was fair when we moved in, and nothing about our living situation has changed. I still have the same small attic room, still use the same shared spaces, still eat the same amount of food. As I lie in my bed, staring at the slanted ceiling I've looked at for 6 years, I can hear them gathering in the living room again. Their voices are too muffled for me to make out the words, but the tone is clear enough. They're having a meeting about me, about this situation, about our future as roommates. And for the first time since I moved into this quirky attic room 6 years ago, I'm not sure if I still have a place in this apartment. The thought makes my chest tight in a way that has nothing to do with my upcoming night shift. I pull out my phone and start looking at rental listings in the area, more out of habit than any real intention to move. The prices make me wince. Even with my attending physician's salary, the current rental market is brutal. Our rent-controlled apartment suddenly seems even more valuable, which only complicates the situation further. I close the app and set an alarm for my shift, knowing that in a few hours I'll have to walk past my angry roommates on my way to work, where I'll spend 12 hours dealing with other people's emergencies while my own life feels like it's unraveling. The sound of someone slamming a cabinet door downstairs makes me jump. It's going to be a long day, and an even longer night ahead at the hospital. But right now, as I lie here in my attic sanctuary that suddenly feels more like an isolation chamber, I can't help feeling like whatever happens next will change everything about the careful balance we've maintained for the past 6 years. And I'm not sure if any of us are ready for that change.